worked with him until darkness rescued the weary bodies, that in their old age they must surrender the fruit of their toil. They would have left just what they had started with. They had just held their own. Coming down on the train, he'd made up his mind that if Hanson were in town he would tell him that he could have the land. He was so very tired and old, so bowed down with Fred's "what's the use," that he saw that he himself would never get the mortgage paid off. And Fred had said something about making the railroads pay it. He did not know just how the boy figured that out. Indeed, he was getting a little dazed about the whole thing. But if Fritz had any idea of having the railroads pay off the mortgage on his farm, he couldn't forget how the boy looked when he said it, face white, eyes burning. He would see to it right now that there was no chance of that. He tried not to look at the land as he drove past it on the way home. He wondered just how much campaign literature it had paid for. He wondered if he would ever get used to seeing Claus Hansen putting up his hay over there in that field. He had felt so badly about telling Mother that he told it very bluntly, and because he felt so sorry for her, he said not one kind word, but just sat quiet, looking the other way. She was clearing off the table. He heard her scraping out the potato dish with great care. Then she was coming over to him. She came awkwardly, hesitatingly. Her life had not schooled her in meeting emotional moments beautifully. But she laid her hand upon him, patted him on the shoulder as one would a child. "Never mind, Papa, never you mind. It will make it easier for us. There's enough left, and it will make it easier. We're getting on. There she broke off abruptly into a vigorous scolding of the dog, who was lifting covetous nostrils to a piece of meat. That was all. And there was no woman in the country had worked harder. And Martha was ambitious. She liked land, and she did not like Claus Hansen's wife. Yes, he had had a good wife. Then there was that other thing to tell her about Fritz. That was harder. Mother had not gone up to the city to hear Fritz speak because her feet were bothering her and she could not wear her shoes. He had had a vague idea of how disappointed she was, though she'd said very little about it. Martha never had been one to say much about things. When he came back, of course she'd wanted to know all about it, and he had put her off. Now he had to tell her. It was much harder, and in the telling of it he broke down. This time she did not come over and pat his shoulder. Perhaps Martha knew. Likely she'd never heard the word intuition. But anyway, she knew that it was beyond that. It seemed difficult for her to comprehend. She was bewildered to find that Fritz could change parties all in a minute. She seemed to grasp, first of all, that it was disrespectful to his father. Some boys at school had been putting notions into his head. But gradually she began to see it. Fritz wanted to make money. Fritz wanted to have it easier, and the other people did have it easier. It divided her feeling, sorry and indignant for the father, secretly glad and relieved for the boy. "He will have it easier than we had it, Papa," she said at the last. "But it was not right of Fritz," she concluded, vaguely but severely. As she washed the dishes, Martha was thinking that likely Fritz's wife would have a hired girl. Then Martha went up to bed. He said that he would come in a few minutes, but many minutes went by while he sat out on the side porch trying to think it out. The moon was shining brightly down on that 160 which Claus Hansen was to have, and the moon, too, seemed to be saying, what's the use? Well, what was the use? Perhaps after all the boy was right. What had it all amounted to? What was there left? What had he done? 2 Americas, Fred had said, and his but the America of the dreamers. He had always thought that he was fighting for the real, and now Fred said that he had never become an American at all. From the time he was 12 years old, he had wanted to be an American. A queer old man back in the German village. An old man, he recalled strangely now, who had never been in America, told him about it. He told how all men were brothers in America, how the poor and the rich loved each other. Indeed, how there were no poor and rich at all, but the same chance for every man who would work. He told about the marvelous resources of that distant America, gold in the earth, which men were free to go and get, hundreds upon hundreds of miles of untouched forest and great rivers, all for men to use, great cities no older than the men who were in them, which men at that present moment were making every man his equal chance. He told of rich land which a man could have for nothing, which would be his if he would but go and work upon it. In the heart of the little German boy there was kindled then a fire which the years had never put out. His cheeks grew red, his eyes bright and very deep as he listened to the story. He went home that night and dreamed of going to America, and through the years of his boyhood, penny by penny, he saved his money for America. It was his dream. It was the passion of his life. More plainly than the events of yesterday, he remembered his first glimpse of those wonderful shores, the lump in his throat, the passionate excitement, the uplift, leaning over the railing of his boat, staring, searching, penetrating, worshipping. He lifted up his heart and sent out his pledge of allegiance to the new land. How he would love America, work for it, be true to it. He had $3.60 in his pocket when he stepped upon American soil. He wondered if any man had ever felt richer, for had he not reached the land where there was an equal chance for every man who would work, where men loved each other as brothers, and where the earth itself was so rich and so gracious in its offerings? The old man crossed one leg over the other, slowly, stiffly. It made him tired and stiff now, just to think of the work he had done between that day and this. But there was something which he had always had. That something was his America. That had never wavered, though he soon learned that between it and realities were many things which were wrong and unfortunate. With the whole force and passion of his nature, with all his single-mindedness, would some call it simple-mindedness? He threw himself into the fight against those things which were blurring men's vision of his America. No work, no sacrifice was too great, for America had enemies who called themselves friends, men who were striking heavy blows at that equal chance for every man. When he failed, it was because he did not know enough. He must work, he must study, he must think in order to make more real to other men the America which was in his heart. He must fight for it because it was his. And now it seemed that the end had come. He was old, he was tired, he was not sure. Claus Hansen would have his land, and his son would join hands with the things which he had spent his life in fighting. And far deeper and sadder and more bitter than that